Alright, we're doing public international law. Now, I've slacked off a bit. I've still got one more week that I have to do, week 7. We're currently in the break, so I'm just catching up. I've got to make 1, 2, 3, and then 4 videos. So here we go. I'm going to make 3 today. So, first one, statehood, week 4. Statehood is the idea that you are a state, right? It's sort of not that hard to get your head around. So state and international law, as defined by the Montevideo Convention on the Rights and Duties of States, lists a permanent population, defined territory, a permanent government, and capacity to enter legal relations as the requirements needed for you to be a state. Right. It's kind of straightforward. But what's sort of worth mentioning is that all these things, like, they don't always have to be exactly, what they are all the time. So, for example, a permanent population doesn't really matter, as I say, the size, only permanence matters. So if 10 people are on an island, but 10 people are staying there, then boom, we've got a state. Defined territory, as long as we can sort of loosely say, this is about where, my state is. It's around here and sort of here and sort of here. The reason being because if borders have to be negotiated with, or if borders are not as clearly defined, or if there's dispute or whatever, then a country can still maintain their statehood, just as long as it was defined or can be defined somehow. Permanent government, so it can be a fragile government, so one where the government's kind of loose. As long as there was a government at some point ever, it becomes, it fits the criteria. The type doesn't really matter. It can be a democracy, it can be an aristocracy, it can be a dictatorship, whatever. States are their own entities, and on an international level they have more rights and freedoms than anyone else being non-state actors or individuals. So the key here is that states have sovereignty, which we looked at in the past weeks, and we'll look at again here. So non-state actors include mostly just international organizations. International organizations, it's kind of like imagine if, here's a good analogy. I've got my bank account, right? You've got your bank account. Jimmy has his bank account, right? We are all states, so to speak, right? Now, if we want to open up our own business, let's say, our own organization, then we would open up a new bank account and pour all of our money into there. We'll pour our money into the organization, right? So the organization is still run by me, you, and Jimmy, but it's in reliance of what we give it, and it's kind of like that with the countries as well. So, international organizations only have as much power as is given to them by states. Non-state armed actors, some other people. So non-state armed conflicts, that's like when two gangs from rivaling countries are at war, but the countries themselves are not at war. Individuals, let's see what I write here, are generally held to domestic standards. Yep, that's right. So you have to follow the laws of your country. If you violate the laws, then you'll be tried in your own country. And you're held to the rights and responsibilities of your own country, except that human rights apply to everyone, and obligations against violations of just Kogan. So if you remember, that's peremptory norms, things like don't torture or don't commit genocide. Those are held to everyone too. Yes. Okay. Yeah. Sure. So groups of individuals are another thing that international law applies to. They're called peoples, and they're defined by individuals with heritage, language, territory, and/or a culture in common, and they have the right to self-determination, as we all do. Peoples is kind of a loose definition because it's sort of hard to pinpoint. It's sort of hard to define, especially because people are made up of a group of individuals, and individuals can be so different, and can have so many different characteristics. So it's hard to categorize them. The ICCPR, which you would have learnt about in legal studies, it's like a big old group, a big old treaty made between a whole bunch of countries. Classes minority people. So, for example, Arabs living in Australia. Each one of those is an individual, but indigenous groups like Indigenous Australians, they're all classed as a group. And the UN Declaration, you can read the rights of Indigenous people here, right here. It says that Indigenous groups have the right to self-determination. Recognition of statehood, right? So how do we decide that one group of people is a state and one group of people is not? There's two sort of theories. The first is that the first theory is that all the country has to do is tick all the boxes as listed up here, and the second is that everyone else has to recognise that the state exists. So let's take a look at declaratory theory. I just can't remember which is which. When an existing state recognises a new state, this is said to be nothing more than an acknowledgement of pre-existing legal capacity. This is temporary statehood by United States, independent on recognition from other states. Yeah, okay, so here we go. States are recognised when other states recognise them. Usually it's unilateral, right? So I come up with a country, right? I come up with Torchville, right? And Torchville is my country, right? Now, the way that it becomes a country and the way that everyone recognises it, under declaratory theory, is when, let's say, Australia looks at me and goes, oh, okay, yep, you're, Torchville, you are a country. We recognise you, and we recognise your legal capacity, your statehood, which, remember, we said that's one of the criteria up here. So therefore, Australia recognises Torchville as a country. That's declaratory theory. Constitutive theory says that a whole bunch of people, so a whole bunch of UN members, have to agree that Torchville is a country before it can become a country. Yes, I'm pretty sure that's how it is. You might want to double check that. You might want to look that up. States are recognised when other states are recognised. Yeah, so usually it's unilateral. One state must recognise another. Yeah, so let's say Torchville enters an agreement with Australia, the UK, America, and Brazil, or whatever. If Torchville enters, then it's sort of implied that Torchville has statehood because it's engaging in legal personality. Yeah, so the UN General Assembly is an example of this. That's a group of people, and so 2/3 of the members have to agree to recognise the state before the state is recognised, right? So 2/3 of the countries have to go, yep, Torchville, you're a country. Although if a permanent member objects, statehood cannot be granted. So I think France is a permanent member. If France goes, no way, I will not recognise Torchville, then Torchville can't be a state. I hope this all makes sense. Non-recognition, the Declaration of Independence. Yeah, okay, so this is a case here. Declaration of Independence in respect of Kosovo, advisory opinion. The ICJ said that the unlawful use of force or other egregious violations of norms of general international law, in particular those of a peremptory character, just Kogan's, that a state should not be recognised. Right, so what does this mean? Well, if I start a country, if I start Torchville and I do that by enslaving all of New South Wales and torturing people and killing people and committing like a mass genocide against New South Welshmen, then there is a duty for everyone to not recognise me as a state, because the way that it came about was not pretty cool. And I think if we look at jurisdiction, yeah, we'll talk about that more later in the next video. Secession. Secession is the idea that one part of a country can split off from the rest of it. Reference for secession of Quebec. Yep. Yeah, basically one country splits in two. This case focuses on self-determination, right? So Quebec wanted to split from the rest of Canada. Quebec is like a province in Canada. And Canada were like, well, we're not going to really let you do that, right? So a group cannot unilaterally secede. So in our class we looked at Western Australia. Western Australia can't just decide, hey, we are done, we want to split. The two reasons for this are, it has to be valid in domestic law, which it isn't in Australia. But if it is, then the sort of parent state also has to agree to let the new state secede. So it can't be unilateral. It's probably worth mentioning the right to self-determination now. So the right to self-determination is the right for a group of people to form their own, or to express their own nationality or identity or all that kind of stuff, as seen. Where was it seen? I mentioned it before, I just can't remember where. Yeah, and so this happens in two forms, internal and external, right? So in Australia, we're a pretty tolerant country. If you want to bring your own culture and way of living here, then you can. And so therefore, you have an internal right to self-determination. If this is not granted, then you are granted external self-determination, which is where your group can just move to another country and find a home there, or you can form your own country and exercise your right to self-determination there. Now, the right to external self-determination leading to secession is only upheld in dire drastic circumstances, and generally territorial integrity prevails over the right to self-determination. Right, so let's say a group of Torchvillians with their own Torchville religion and their own Torchville language and whatever decide that they want to claim New South Wales as their own land, which is not allowed in domestic law, and the rest of Australia might not like that. Generally, Australia's territorial integrity will prevail. That being said, an example where their external right to self-determination would be valid is if the rest of the UN or whoever decides, no, we're going to split this because you guys are treating Torchvillians so badly. Yeah, that's it. Thanks for watching. I hope it makes sense. I'll see you in the next one.